Hey, Shalom, Kal Halal, Yahweh Bashim, Yahweh Shai, Bashim Hakodash, the ones, the apostles of Great Millstone, and Shalom, true brothers in the highways and byways, doing the work sincerely and faithfully, continually fighting the good fight of faith, Lord willing, we're finding the number to be delivered. All right, so I'm gonna go back with a little bit of flashback here, and just go through the book of Genesis, the 17th chapter, concerning Abraham and him being the father of many nations. All right, so a while back, now this clip is was remastered, if you will, by the brother Elder Manat Zakba of GMS South Carolina. He put a little, he put it together and put some emojis on there and kind of spice it up a little bit. But the message is clear. We was going back and forth with these Christians, and these Christians, they come up every blue moon, speaking what they seem to believe to be the truth, and go astray and go off and fall into the abyss of spiritual ass whooping. But that being said, I had asked him a question concerning Abraham being the father of many nations, and what does it mean? Because prior to that, he was speaking about Christ and the Lord going through Paul to many nations and speaking in different languages. So we was kind of going through it for a while. And if you brothers remember, I'm sure you brothers remember the clip. But I'm gonna play a little bit of the clip, and then we're gonna kind of break it down a little bit. Go to Genesis the 17th chapter and bounce around a little bit, just to get a little edification on why it was that Abraham has become the father of many nations. Now, the elder tries to give him some beautiful examples of why this is, and why, the Lord had made mention of, the disciples going from region to region, different nations and different languages, but he just wasn't grasping it. And he made mention he made mention in the video, you guys are pretty good on your argument, but he still don't believe. But anyway, without further ado, let's play a little bit of the clip.
Revelation, it talks about tribes from many tongues and many nations.
Right.
Is it just talking about Jews?
Yes.
It's talking about in the 7th chapter.
Yes, because
Why would it say
Jewish is a misnomer. You got to call them Israelites. Because the reason why they have many tongues and many languages, because they live in those lands.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Because my son, if I have sex with a white woman, he's gonna come out lighter. If my son,
but not even the color. Not even the color. I'll give you a perfect example. How did black people get here to America?
Hold on, I'm done.
You gotta answer the question.
I just want to go run down the street.
No, let's have this conversation. Because you're asking me how does it make sense. I don't want to be keeping you here all day.
Look, I understand.
But I speak English because I was brought here to this country.
I understand.
So to speak a different language is not a foreign thing. I speak this language because I'm here in America. But if I was in China, I would speak Chinese. That's how these other nations or these Israelites speak languages like the other nations.
Let me say this last thing. It was said unto Abraham, he was going to be the father of many nations. Right? What does that mean? Because Abraham had there was a promising line.
What makes more sense? The fact that he's talking about scattered Jews or many nations? Actually,
All right, so
many nations.
let me put it this way.
What makes
There was
more
a
sense?
promise. There was a promise that was told unto Abraham, right? There was a promise. Okay? And that promise is going to run from Abraham to Isaac unto Jacob. So if we're concerned about that promise, now we got to understand why it was said he was going to be the father of many nations. Because that seed, the diaspora, was going to be dispersed in many nations. And this is why we have to go, as it said in Corinthians, when you're speaking in tongues, there's going to be different languages we're going to have to learn and understand. Because our people are going to be speaking Spanish, Greek, Portuguese, Italian.
How does someone get there? How do you get to it?
All you got to do is die.
How do you receive forgiveness?
By the Lord Yahweh Shai, Lord Jesus Christ.
What you said? The elder said something, right? It's not you. The elder said something, right? Which is beautiful. I think in the midst of all this, we missed something. And what we missed is there was a promise that was given to a man, Abraham, right? That his seed would rule forever. They'll be as the sand of the sea, as the stars of heaven, and they will be blessed above all nations.
Not into seeds as of many, but a seed as of one.
Yes, and that seed line went through certain people, as the scripture stated it would be. So regardless of people's feelings of who it was, or what color they was, or where they were, At the end of the day, there's a people that is going to be blessed above everybody, and that's the will of the Heavenly Father. His will is going to be done.
Paul says there's no Jew, nor uncircumcised, nor Scythian,
So let me ask you a question.
It's because Christ makes all.
So when you're dealing with
all Israelites.
when you're dealing with the law, right? You're dealing with circumcision,
You
right?
guys are no different than the Judaizers coming into the Galatian church preaching a false gospel.
Yeah, we've heard that before.
Look, I'm not. Just because I'm white, don't relate. Look,
What makes us false and you true?
You guys.
What makes us false and you true?
You guys.
What makes you true? What makes
salvation is by
But I'm saying,
grace
but
with you guys.
what makes you
I
true?
believe salvation is by Christ.
Okay. We'll say it. We'll agree with you.
Who was he sent to?
See, you know what happened? You couldn't handle it. The heat got too hot in the kitchen, which is fine. We didn't twist anything.
We read it straight out.
Okay, so when it says Abraham is going to be the father of many nations, what does that mean?
Of course he doesn't
Was all nations born of Abraham? Was all nations born of Abraham? Was all nations born of Abraham?
You guys.
You remind me of Joel Osteen, man. You are a liar and a deceiver.
You're going into slavery.
You're a deceiver.
All right, so there you have it. You know, the question I threw the question at him was, were all nations born of Abraham? All right, and it's very important to understand what that means when it's spoken that Abraham was going to be the father of many nations. And these Christians, they take that, and once again, he had made mention of that earlier in the day. All right, and the majority of these Christians, when they come up against brothers, their last go-to is, you see, Abraham's the father of many nations, but Abraham is not the progenitor of all these nations. So therefore, you can't use it in the scope of every single spirit and soul on the planet is going to be blessed because of Abraham. All right, that makes no sense. It has to be through Abraham's seed. It has to be through that covenant. It has to be through that promise. It has to be through that royal line in which we're speaking of the people who are going to be blessed and receive the promise and the covenants, whose were the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right. So from here, let's go to Genesis, the 17th chapter. And we're going to just jump around a little bit and read a little bit. All right. You know, as we know, at this point, Abraham had one son at this point, which was Ishmael. And not only did he have Ishmael, Abraham was 99 years old, and Sarah was 90 years old. So they were up there in age. He had one son in whom he thought that his inheritance was going to go to Ishmael. So let's read. Let's go to verse 4. We're going right to the points here. And verse 3. And Abraham fell on his face, and the power talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. All right. Why? How is this possible? How is this possible, and why is it being said unto him? All right. Now, in the Christian world, in the Christianity world, they'll look at that and read that as saying, this is the gateway scripture for all mankind to come and return back to the Lord. All right. Let's read verse 5. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. And there's your point. For Abraham now is known to be what? The father of many nations. Okay? Why is he the father of many nations? Why? Now keep in mind, in verse 4, the Lord said, Behold, my covenant is with thee. So now we're talking about a covenant. There's a covenant that has to be, what word should I use? There's a covenant that has to be appointed. All right. So jumping down to verse 6, and I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. Now, how is the Lord going to make Abraham exceedingly fruitful? Okay, the scriptures speak about the fruit of thy loins, meaning your children, right? So if Abraham was going to be exceedingly fruitful, and he's going to be the father of many nations. Now this should start to come together for you. Okay? I'll read it again. Verse 6, and I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. So there pretty much lies your answer as to why Abraham was going to be the father of many nations, because the Lord was going to make him exceedingly fruitful, and kings were going to come out of him. All right, what kings are we talking about? Who are these kings? And why are they being called kings? Because at this point in time, keep in mind, Abraham has one son. All right, so let's bounce down a little bit. Let's go down to 18. We're going to jump around a little bit. Right? So he said kings were going to come out of him. Let's jump to verse 18. And it says, and Abram said unto the power, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. Right? Now, that one son that he has, being of this age right now, okay, being of that age, who was Ishmael. Give me one second. Okay. All right, here we go. All right, so verse 18, that one son that he had, Abraham thought that what? That this is where the promise was going to lie, or the covenant was going to lie, right? But now let's read down, okay? Let's read verse 20 real quick. And it says, and as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he begat, and I will make him a great nation. All right? So, how is it that, wait a minute, jumping up to verse 6 says what? And I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. Now we're being faced with a question here. Why is it in verse 4 he's saying kings are going to come out of him, and in verse 18 he's explaining that verse 20 he's explaining that princes were going to come out of him. Okay? So there's a difference here. There's a difference, because that line where the covenant was going to go through was not going through Ishmael, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. All right? In Isaac shall the seed be called. So if the seed is going to be called in Isaac, then where do we turn? Where is it now going to be turned to? But keep it in mind, keep it on track, he's going to be the father of many nations. Right? So that covenant that was spoken may be a sign. Okay? So let's go back up, and we'll start at verse 10. All right? We'll go to 9. Go to 9. And it says, and the power said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant before you, in thy seed after thee in their generations. Right? This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man child among you shall be circumcised. All right? So the law of circumcision wasn't given to everybody. It was not given to everybody. That was given to Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto the 12 patriarchs through Jacob. Okay? Though Ishmael was circumcised, let's go down and check it out. Verse 25. Verse 24. And Abram was 99 years old and 9 when he was circumcised in his flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in his flesh and his foreskin. All right. And the self same day, Abraham circumcised and his son, and Ishmael his son. Okay. So even though Ishmael was the first to be circumcised of the children, but the promise of the circumcision was going to lie with between Abraham, Isaac, and then unto Jacob. Okay. But the Lord had instructed Abraham as well, I believe back in verse, like I said, we're going to jump around a little bit. Verse 12 and 13, the Lord speaks of how anybody that comes into your household must be circumcised as well. All right, even if they're not of thy seed. So stay back, once again, staying on track, that covenant and the covenant of circumcision wasn't given to all these nations, man. All right. And Abraham, primarily the source of the lesson, Abraham being the father of many nations, denotes that what? It was going to go through his seed, his line, through Isaac, as it is written, going down. Where were we? Verse 21, it says, "But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee in the set time in the next year." All right. So the covenant went unto Isaac. Now, from there, let's go to what we got here. Genesis 49. All right. Just to show you the pattern in which Abraham being the father of many nations. Okay. This is Genesis 49 in 1. "And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which will befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together, and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father." All right. Now, if you notice, you don't hear or see anything concerning Abraham speaking to any of his sons in the sense of who the promise was going to go to. All right. It's not until Isaac has Jacob and Jacob has his sons. Because at this very time, Esau was also on the planet. But you don't see any scriptures of Esau going to the Dukes of Edom saying, here's what's going to happen to you. All right. All the nations that were on the planet, you don't see Moab getting the sons of Moab in the Moabites and saying, here's what's going to happen to you. None of these nations have any direction as far as what direction they were going to go, what was going to happen to them, where they will, how they're going to prosper. It's all about the nation of Israel. It's all about the nation of Israel. Okay. And as far as that royal line, Abraham, Isaac, and unto Jacob. And now here Jacob is telling his sons what's going to happen to these sons in the last days. Okay. And, and some of these you can use, verse 4. When it comes to verse 5, Levi and Simeon, their brethren, instruments of cruelty are in their habitation. All right. And Simeon and Levi are on what we know today as the island of Hispaniola. Okay. They're brothers, but they're also neighbors, if you will. Okay, let's go here. Let's pull up a new tab. I love Hispaniola. Damn devils. Let me bring it back.
According to Wikipedia, Hispaniola is an island in the Caribbean that is part of the Greater Antilles.
Okay, and this is that island. It's always something with this shit, man. I'm not gonna blow it up, but you see Haiti on one side and the Dominican Republic on the other side, right? But when you understand the dynamics of it, going back up to Genesis 49, when you understand the dynamics of it, Simeon and Levi are brethren. Okay, these are the two tribes that are on that very same island. You know, and sometimes we like to say the instruments of cruelty are in their hands, you know, not only for what they've done for the revenge of their sister, but also for what they do in these last days, you know, as far as witchcraft and voodoo and all kinds of wickedness. All right. So that being said, the idea of Abraham being the father of many nations is inclusive to all people is false, and that teaching ought not to be taught. And this is what's going on in the world today. You know, they're giving you that spirit of, you know, all inclusiveness. Okay, so let me also go here. Let me break it down to what is this here? This is Romans, the 4th chapter. Now you're also going to see and hear where Paul, the Apostle Paul, makes mention or reiterates what's written in Genesis, the 17th chapter. And that starts at about I'll start at 16. I'll start at 16 and get right to the points. It says, therefore, it is of faith that it might be by grace to the end, to the promise might be sure to all the seed. All right? All what seed? The seed coming from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where the promises have been made. Because when you go to Romans, the 9th chapter, it tells you who are Israelites, and it breaks it down. And at the end of that, it says, whose are the fathers, as pertaining who the flesh came, as pertaining who the flesh Christ came. Okay, so that seed is only referring to and denoting the children of Israel. And it says, not to that only which is of the law, but to that also which is of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. Meaning what? That the Apostle Paul was set up to go out and to teach these other nations, okay, as we speaking of the father of many nations, who are of Israel, who are of the seed of Abraham, to let them know as well. These men were taught by the law, but now you're being brought through by faith, the faith of Abraham. Okay? So this is why it's written, verse 17, as it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations. Why? Because Abraham's seed, Abraham's offspring, was going to be in many nations. All right? And when Romans 9 tells you as to who concerning the flesh Christ came, who is that talking about? Those individuals who are now being brought back into the fold by faith and not by the law. Okay? So again, the Christian ideology is that Abraham, the father of many nations, is the opening of, you know, come one, come all, and now you can believe. We had one dude come up a couple weeks ago, and I asked him, I said, are you an Israelite? He said, no, I'm a spiritual Israelite. Well, being a spiritual Israelite don't cut it. You know, if that was the case, you can go back to the story of Balak and Balaam, where Balak had said, I would like to die the death of the righteous. I wish I could die the death of the righteous. So the righteous are who? The Israelites. So you can technically say, yeah, he wanted to be a spiritual Israelite. He believed, but what ended up happening to him? They all ended up getting put to death, man. So it is of the flesh of the royal line, of the royal seed, is how it's determined. All right? Verse 18. Did I finish that? No, let me read verse 17 again. As it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations, before him whom he believed, even the Most High, who quickeneth the dead, and calleth those things which be not as though they were. Verse 18, who against hope believed in hope, that he might become the father of many nations. Who? Why is that written that way? That he might become the father of many nations. Okay, the Lord, when he came to Abraham was up in age. All right, and at first, when the Lord had told him certain things, he didn't believe because he was so old. But when the Lord performed it, then he believed it. Then he truly believed. Okay, and it says, "So shall thy seed be." All right. So that royal line and that royal seed is going to be everywhere in all nations. Hence the reason why Abraham is going to be known as the father of many nations. You see? So don't let people, fool you and trick you into believing that because they believe in the faith of Abraham, they have now been accounted for the covenant and in the promise. No, that can only be received by those of the seed and of the flesh. That's how you receive that promise, man. Let me go to Romans, go out right. Okay, so Romans 9. I say the truth in Christ, I lie not. My conscience also bear me witness in the Holy Spirit. Right? Let me just get right to the points. For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh. There it is. According to the flesh, not according to the spirit. You ain't getting involved in this thing being a spiritual Israelite. It is handed down through the flesh. Okay? And it says, who are Israelites? You can't just read over this. You can't just take this and nope. We're gonna pick this one. We're gonna pick this verse out. No, you gotta read it all. Now, I wanna read the last portion. Let me see. Read the last portion of that understanding. Let me see. Right, here it is. Let me read 4. It says, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the services of the Most High and the promises. Now here's the point, verse 5. Whose are the fathers? So everything we just read belongs to who? The fathers. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is who that belongs to. You hear people talk about the adoption. You hear people talking about the glory and the law and the covenants and the services of the Most High. You hear people talking about these things. But who do they belong to? Paul tells you clearly, whose are the fathers, and of whom, as concerning the flesh, okay, concerning the flesh, the Lord ain't coming from no spiritual Israelite. He ain't coming from no heathen. He tells you, whose are the fathers, and of whom, as concerning the flesh, Christ came. So the Lord was sent down here for those who were of the flesh, of the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Point blank, period. Okay? But nobody wants to read this. Nobody wants to read this. They still want to continue to go on and on and on about Abraham and, the father of many nations and this, that, and the third. All right, so let's end it with this. I think this is got to be Galatians, the 2nd chapter or the 3rd chapter, one of the chapters here. Yeah, the 3rd chapter. Let me read it. Yep. Okay. So, and this is the tale of where they try to link Genesis the 17th chapter to Galatians the 3rd chapter. They try to link these two together in their defense of that the gate has been open to everybody. All right. So let's start at about. We'll start now. Keep in mind the Church of Galatia. All right. They were, being double-minded, if you will. But let's get to the points. I'll start at 7. I'll start at 6. It says, even as Abraham believed the Most High, and it was accounted to him as righteousness. Know ye therefore that they which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. All right. When you blanketly read this, you will get the understanding that this is talking about everybody. But you have to go through the proper cycles to get the true understanding. Okay? And it says, verse 8, in the scriptures foreseeth that the Most High would justify the heathen through faith, preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, in thee shall all nations be blessed. Now, you want to say that word heathen. Okay? Now, most people don't classify themselves as heathens, right? And some of these new revised versions, they omit that word heathen, all right, to give you a better taste, if you will, that it's not talking about, nations who are barbaric. This is talking about Israelites, all right, who have been lost from the fold, who are aliens from the commonwealth, who weren't keeping the law, who was taking on different philosophies and languages. This is who that's talking about, okay? Because the only ones that can be justified are Israelites, all right? And it says, and the scripture foreseeth that the Most High would justify the heathen through faith. How was this being done? Because the Apostle Paul was going around preaching to those Israelite foreigners. All right? And it says, preach before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, in thee shall all nations be blessed. Right. In thee shall all nations be blessed. Because why? Abraham's seed is going to be dispersed in all nations. All right? Abraham's seed. The line. And it says, so then they which be of faith are the blessed with faithful Abraham. Why? Because they who believed that when Paul was going around teaching this word, they were now finding out that they are the line in the lineage of Abraham. They are that royal seed, that royal line. Okay? So this is how, these other dominations, if you will, try to link themselves into the flock or into the fold of being of the righteous, of being of faith. Because once again, they're not taking, they're not getting full understanding of what is being meant by when you see the word heathen. They think that's somebody outside of the nation of Israel. Are they heathens? Absolutely. But concerning what we're reading here, as concerning Abraham and the seed of Abraham and the faith, these all belong and pertain to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right? So, again, Abraham's the father of many nations. How and why? Because his seed was going to be dispersed throughout the whole world. Okay? And even when you read down to verse 14, it says that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Yahushua Mashiach, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. We might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. Well, Romans 9, and again, and it reads, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption, the glory, the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the services of the Most High and the promises. Okay? But again, you have to have the Spirit of the Lord upon you to really understand this. And these Christians and all these other denominations, they don't have the Spirit of the Lord upon them. They totally skip out on putting the pieces of the puzzle together. They have the pieces, but they don't know how to put it together. And if you don't have the spiritual, fortification to put these pieces together, then clearly the Lord is not, with you on this. All right? So Abraham being the father of many nations, the promises, the covenants, the law, all these things belong unto the children of Israel, who were dispersed throughout the four corners of the earth in all nations. And this is why when you go to Corinthians again, you have to have an interpreter when a man speaks in an unknown tongue. All right, so Lord willing, I'm going to end it right there. Brothers, I believe brothers get the understanding, and I'll come back on another one. I'll see you then. Shalom.